Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here, and my guest today is Joselle Hale. Welcome. So
Thank you for having me.
I ran into you at Sturbridge Village actually, and you were forging a little hook there, something
Yes.
for embroidery. Tell me, you know what? Don't tell me actually. Tell me
Okay.
first how you ended up in Sturbridge Village. Tell me like a little bit of your crafting story.
Okay. So I am an experimental archaeologist, which means that I um take things from that classical archaeologists find in the field and I recreate them using the parameters of the time period, what was found at the site and things like that, and see if their hypotheses are correct. So I've done lots of different things from stone tool making to Neolithic house building, to bronze casting. And I did that in Ireland where I got my master's. And when I came back to the States, I really wanted to continue doing historic metalworking. That's what was my favorite part of my degree, was doing medieval bronze casting. And so working at Sturbridge Village kind of just fell into my lap. They had a fellowship opening for blacksmithing. And I was lucky enough to get that. And so I have been training in blacksmithing for the past year-ish, and hope to continue on in the future.
Well, for those who are not from the US or don't know about Sturbridge Village, tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, Old Sturbridge Village is a living history museum. It is comprised of over 40 historic buildings from the late 18th to early 19th century in New England. We portray the time period of 1838, but specifically if you ask us what year it is, that's what we'll say. But we go from 1790 to about 1840, all told throughout the village. Anything within that period is considered our time period. And we have hearth cooking and potters and everybody, a lot of tradesmen, and common household things from the period, and people portraying that. We're called costumed historians, so we're wearing 1830s clothing and and portraying the 1830s to our visitors who come to visit us.
Well, tell me now about that hook that you were making. What was that and when was it used and how is it used today?
Yeah, so I was working on a tambour hook, which is a type of embroidery. Here's an antique one that I was gifted by a friend last week, and it is one of the precursors to modern day crocheting. It was very popular in France, and it was a very popular way of making lace for a while. I've been learning about it through this book called Tambour Works. It's got a bunch of patterns in it that I've been following, historic patterns, and I was lent that by our historic costume director at Old Sturbridge Village. And so I do crocheting and freehand embroidery, and I thought, might as well try something new too, and kind of bring my passions of both fiber arts and blacksmithing together and make my own tambour hooks.
Oh, how did it go? Like, was it immediate success when you tried to make the first one?
Absolutely not. We have run into a little bit of difficulty, mostly because filing is a big part of blacksmithing. People don't think about it. They think of, big swords and things like that, and the hot fire. But there's a lot of file work involved when in blacksmithing, and especially for something so small, all of those small details and things like that. We do not have a small enough file for me to do the file work for it. So we are waiting for that to come in. And hopefully that will be this week. I'm hoping. because otherwise I can get it as small as I can, but I can't do the
Like lace.
the lace part. And so this is such a small, I can make the initial indentation here, but I can't file it out and make it circular without a file. So that's something that we've caught a snag on during the process. And hopefully that will be remedied within the next week.
Well, when you mentioned that to me, I had to go and look it up because like I've never seen it before, right? So I had to go on YouTube University and check out all the tutorials for the beginners of how to do it, how to do that sort of type of embroidery. And it actually doesn't look that easy to me.
It's hard. Like I said, I've done some freehand embroidery. I taught myself. And so I'm very used to just kind of like doing whatever I want and just kind of going with the flow with my projects. But as I said, I've been trying to do these historic patterns from this book. And it's been difficult. It's very, you have to kind of keep, at least in the book, it says you have to keep kind of very, very straight from the top. And then on the bottom with the hook, and then on the bottom you have the string and that you're holding. And it's very kind of hard to coordinate for me, at least.
Right.
Keep everything and to get all of the pieces of thread through the needle or through the hook and through the fabric all at the same time. I've been struggling with that.
Well, like working in Sturbridge Village, is that inspiring or is it distracting? Because there's like, I mean, I went there and to me, this is like better than Disney World because I get to see how people spin yarn, how people dye yarn, like what they use, what kind of plants they grow to dye yarn with. And then there is the baby sheep that I was saving because it's escaped through the gate and everybody was afraid to touch it. And of course I had to grab it and like take a quick picture and give it back to mom. So to me, this is like a wonderland, you know? How is it for you? Because like you're surrounded not only with like artists there, but like immense amount of knowledge also.
Yeah, it is definitely a struggle sometimes. Everybody kind of has their very specific thing that they're good at. One of my coworkers actually just gave a presentation on how to properly clean wooden milk buckets so that they don't get moldy. And you know, that's not something that people in the modern day really think about too much, but it was you know, something that is like, oh my gosh, yeah, you have to, that's something that we have to think about. But I mean, for me, I'm not usually in the houses. I'm not usually in where they're doing all the dyeing and stuff. And so it does feel a little bit isolating because I like doing that stuff. You know, I love crocheting and I'm trying to get back into knitting. And I have my own great wheel. I haven't yet been able to put it together, but I've been trying. I want to start spinning my own wool. But because I've been relegated to the countrysides as a blacksmith, I haven't really gotten to really pick people's brains as much as I would have liked about those types of things that would have really helped me, because as an experimental archaeologist, I really want to do a lot of historic recreations of, you know, of fiber craft, and hopefully I'll get the chance to pick everybody's brain a little bit more now that I'm much more confident and more done with my basic training, I guess, for blacksmithing, and have more opportunity to do other things like the yarn dyeing and things like that.
Well, how much freedom do you have to try something that you want to try? Because like I went to the pottery barn there, right? And the person had a list of things that they had to create. And it wasn't something, you know, a vase for mom. It was like really serious inventory for the whole village.
Yeah.
How much freedom do you have in what you can make?
It depends on the trade shop. So pottery and the tin shop definitely have the most kind of, this is what we need. This needs to be done immediately. Pottery, because they're supplying mugs for every single person in the village, because we have to present ourselves as people from the 1830s. So we can't be walking around with like a hydro flask water bottle. And also for the gift shop, everything that you see in the gift shop, mugs, all the tinware, all the the ironworks, that's all made on site. And so us in the blacksmith shop, we have a little bit more leniency on what we can make, because it costs a lot more money for ironworks in the gift shop, so we don't sell out quite as quickly. But we're also the people that if something breaks, right? If we had the farmers last week come in and say, we need as many nails as you can make us, and just don't stop making nails until we tell you we have enough. And I think we made over, 200 or something nails within that week, because we had other things we had to do. We have to fix door hinges and do all these other things, because it is a working farm. And there are animals that need to be contained. And as you said, the sheep got out all the time. And we have to make sure that the animals are staying safe and that the houses can lock at night, and all of that, and that falls on us. So we do a lot more of the repair around the village, as opposed to kind of inventory like you saw in the pottery shop.
Does it feel weird to come home at night and like watch TV?
Sometimes. It makes it very difficult to watch historic shows. We'll be watching something, and we'll, from roughly our time period, and people will have all the candles in their houses lit. We're like, that's so inaccurate. Nobody would have that many candles lit. You have one candle lit for your house.
Right.
And we get very nitpicky about things.
What's your favorite thing to create in that blacksmith shop? I mean, because like I'm thinking like the same way like every average person thinks about the blacksmith shop. Like I'm thinking the, swords and like big, massive things, right? What's your favorite thing?
I really like making tools. I was trained by a tool maker. So that's kind of what I've been specializing in. I recently finished my first hammer that I made. And that is very exciting. It's a lot of work to try and weld iron and steel together, because that's how they would have been made historically, a body of iron, and then steel on the face and the peen, the back side. And I just finished that recently, and it was a lot of fun. It was very tricky. It was very anxiety inducing to do all the welds and make sure that it works correctly, because if you don't make tools correctly, they can shatter. They can, it could really harm somebody because they're in use. But it's very rewarding when you do it correctly, and you see them out being used, and you can use it yourself, and you're like, I made this thing to make other things. I think that's fun.
Well, when you think about creating something, like things evolved so much, right? That like what was revolutionary back then seems silly nowadays. Do you ever have the urge to like apply today's knowledge to the making process of that time, or it's the ultimate high to like recreate exactly how it's been done?
So there are definitely things that I would like to do the modern way, primarily filing. For bigger things, it would be so much easier just to use kind of like a grinding belt, an electric belt that just kind of like takes away the rust. We have hand files, and a grindstone, which is made for like one specific height, and nobody else can use it without falling over. And it's very difficult to use. So that is one thing that I definitely wish we could bring, that we could use more often in the shop. But for the most part, I really like doing things the historic way. Um, I think that it's very rewarding that I, you know, even though it hasn't been I haven't been trained by my family, we call it the chain, right? This chain of tradesmen. And so the man who trained me, he was trained by somebody and who was trained by somebody, and that goes all the way, can all go all the way back to the start of ironworks in, you know, 1200 BCE, this unbroken chain, and to kind of continue this cycle that has been given to me is honestly a very great honor. I'm very happy to be a part of that chain, and I hope to one day start, you know, maybe having other people join in on the chain from me.
Well, tell me about who trained you or who taught you the fiber arts, and when did that start in your life?
So my grandmother, my paternal grandmother, always made us little Christmas ornaments out of crochet. And you know, I was raised Jewish. My mother is Jewish, but all of my cousins on my dad's side always got these little crisp like snowflakes, and she didn't want us to feel left out, and so she also made them for us. And she, for all of our bar and bat mitzvahs, she would crochet us our kippot, our little hats for our bar and bat mitzvahs. And she passed away very suddenly when I was a freshman in college. And I was always very disappointed that I didn't get to learn from her. And then the pandemic started as I was graduating college. And I said, you know, I'm stuck in the house. I might as well do something productive. And so I ordered a bunch of stuff for crocheting and embroidery online, and I just started looking up YouTube videos and figured it out from there.
When you looking at crochet from the point of view of scholar,
Yes.
are you trying to see like how much it changed or if it's changed at all? Because there is like certain beauty to, I actually had this conversation very recently on TikTok, believe it or not, when I posted the video of my knitting style, and this is the style that my grandmother taught me and her grandmother taught her. And it's very common in Eastern Europe to knit that specific. It's like it's a type of continental knitting, but it's not exactly the classical continental knitting. So this lady commented that it's not a traditional continental, and so it cannot be used in the round. And I was like, it can be used any way you want. And what's not traditional to you is very traditional to half of this world over there, right?
Yeah.
How do you look at crochet? Because it's like it's something that exists for hundreds or I don't even know, maybe thousands of years, but like, do you look at it as an evolution of like what changed, or do you try to recreate it in a historical sense as well?
I think a little bit of both. I love making stuffed animals out of crochet. This is a little elephant that I made for my mom. And I think I put its head on a little weird, but it's one of my beginner projects. So I wasn't quite sure how to attach things yet. But I think that there is a natural way of trades and craft progressing, right? Things don't stay stagnant as people evolve. We get better technology, we have a better understanding of things, and our craft evolves. And to, you know, ignore that evolution is, I think, quite rude to the people who are practicing this newer type of craft. And also it is rude to the people who might have been doing it that way from the start. As you said, you know, it might not be like the traditional continental way of knitting, but that doesn't mean it's incorrect. totally valid way of doing it. And like the way that you're taught is the way that you're probably going to default to doing things. And there is a time for, I think, historic work. I absolutely love doing it. But also it's kind of boring when you're stuck into a very like niche little channel, and to never go out of that channel. I think that it's very important to kind of look on a broader scale and to be able to identify that the changes in things and decide what works for you and what doesn't. And if I only stuck to historic crocheting, I probably wouldn't be making these little stuffed animals. I found a pattern, or a friend of mine was crocheting these little butt pillows, and they're hilarious. I make them for everybody, because they're funny. And if I stuck to that historical way of doing craft, I wouldn't be making those, and people wouldn't be. I wouldn't have the enjoyment of it that I think I do now.
I'm often asked like if I spin yarn, and as much as like it fascinates me and I really want to try it one day, I'm afraid that like if I'm gonna jump into that rabbit hole, I'm just not gonna have time for knitting. Are you afraid that you're spreading yourself thin with like so many different crafts?
Definitely. I have a lot of started projects, and that get finished as I finish them, but it does take a very long time because I have 6 or 7 unfinished or ongoing projects right now, just between embroidery and crocheting, not including anything that I'm doing at work. So I definitely feel that way. But I also I feel like I like to hoard knowledge. Like I just like to try and do everything that I can, because even if I don't like it, I mean, I've tried and I now have that knowledge. I have that, ability to do that. And I think that's very exciting to me, is to say that I can do it even if I don't like it. I can do these things, and to just have that kind of in my wheelhouse. I definitely should get better at finishing projects before I start new ones. But I think we can kind of all relate to that in a way.
Well, part of the village, right? Like when you coming as a visitor, you come to learn. There's like different things that you pick up from different people. Like somebody's gonna tell you like at what temperature to dye yarn with what plant, or you're gonna learn something new. Like doesn't matter how many times you've been there. Like it wasn't my first visit, and I feel like
Yeah.
I'm learning so many things. Do you ever learn anything new from the visitors?
Yes, there have been a couple of times where we'll have visitors who do, specifically for me in the blacksmith shop, who do modern tool making, who work in, modern machinery places. And the way that they talk about things is a lot different than the way that we talk about things. So even if it might be something that I, might have heard of or had in the back of my mind, the modern phrasing of things is not something that I really know. I don't really know the modern way of doing things. And so when we have people who do modern blacksmithing, or who are machinists, who come in and talk to me about the similarities and the differences between historical blacksmithing and the blacksmithing that they do now, or their jobs as machinists, I do learn a lot from them, both in the sense of like the jargon that they use, and also in how what I'm doing evolved into the modern day.
Right. Tell me about your day. Like, do you have time to do something else, or is it like constant flow of visitors, and does that get tiring?
So we get to the village about an hour before we open, and that is we have time for meetings if we need to have them, and to also get started in lighting our fires and doing all that stuff, opening shop and doing all that. And then by 8 or 9:30, we're open to the public. On days where we have school groups, we're pretty much packed from when we open until about 1 o'clock when the school kids leave. And then it gets a little quiet in the afternoon. But when we have school groups, definitely it is constant. I have no time to take a breath. And that does get very tiring because a lot of the times the school kids, when they come in, and I love the school groups, a lot of them have a really great questions, but also a lot of them come with like papers that they have to answer questions on. And so when you have big school groups who are coming in all from the same school, and they have the same like 6 questions, and they ask you that all day. It does very tiring and kind of annoying. And I know, it's what they have to do. They have to get their credit. I just wish I was a little bit more varied. But when we have on the weekends, at least right now, the further we get into the summer, the more busy we'll be on the weekends. It's a lot quieter on the weekends because the school kids aren't there, and you have a lot more time to talk with adults or children who have a much aren't kind of just rushing to get their papers done. So you can have much better conversation with people, I find.
What's the funniest questions you've been asked?
Somebody asked me if I was real. I had a child who I guess didn't realize that I was moving. Actually, this happened twice. I was pulling on the bellows, the big air devices that we use to heat our fires. And this kid shot off like eight or 9 questions in a row, and then he stopped to take a breath, and I started answering. He goes, "You're real?" The biggest eyes, and I was like, "Why were you asking me questions if you didn't think I could answer them?" And then I had a child a few weeks ago who I guess I wasn't moving when he came in, and then I turned around to grab something, and he was like, "Oh, I thought you were an animatronic." and and that's fun. We sometimes have kids who would come from like cities and might not have seen like cows before, and things like that, who will ask if the cows outside are real or if my fire is a real fire. Because they might not have seen, fire in that context before. And I always think that that's very interesting. I grew up, going camping and always having like surrounded by fire, and that's how they would have also grown up in the 1830s. So it's very interesting to me that, we have these kids who have never seen it before, who in real life, in the context that's not like, maybe a gas stove or something like that.
Tell me about your ambitions about the fiber arts. Like you mentioned to me briefly that you're considering designing, like toying with the idea of designing.
Yes. I have been mostly just following other people's patterns for the most part, at least in crocheting. For embroidery, sometimes I'll take a basic like idea and kind of take pieces from a couple of different places and sketch it out. But I'm not that great of a drawer, so I do a lot of tracing, but they're all for my own personal use. But it has been something that I've been toying with of as I'm getting better, of trying to make my own designs, just to kind of stretch my knowledge, I guess, and see if I can do it. Like I said, I'm a hoarder of knowledge. I want to do as much as I can. So that's something that I hope to do within the next year or so, is start toying with that and kind of seeing how the process is done. I don't know anybody who makes their own patterns, so I have to, also something that I'm going to try and figure out, I guess, as I go along.
Well, if you just look at my channel, you'll see a lot of
Yeah.
people who do their own patterns. So there is a whole playlist. And by the way, if you guys watching and you don't know how to navigate my channel, there is playlists option. And if you just click on that, it shows you designers, crocheters, embroidery artists, macrame artists, like whatever tickles your fancy. So you can find some new playlist for you and just watch interview with those people. And that might be easier. Well, when you doing fiber arts, right? When you're doing embroidery or when you're doing crochet, is your seeking knowledge, like, are you going for new techniques? Are you going for, like, do you feel like you're getting more and more into more complicated things? Or is that like you're coming from work exhausted after all the questions and you just want something to relax?
It depends on the day. So after work, definitely I'm putting something on TV and I'm picking maybe something that I've already done before or something that I've been working on for a while that I kind of can get just into the rhythm of really easily. If I'm, you know, I recently have been trying to teach one of my friends how to crochet. And when I do that, I usually start very simple, obviously, because they don't know what they're doing. But I also like to, once they get started and they start figuring it out, when we're doing it together, I like to try and work on more complicated things just so that they can also see like how things progress, not just like, straight crocheting a scarf or whatever, but the more complicated stitches and how things can be, how it works up, I guess. And I think that that's very fun. Yeah.
When you're picking patterns, like, are you intimidated by anything, like, or you just fearless in everything you do?
Definitely. There is a crochet pattern of a scarf that I have been trying to do for 2 years now, and I have not been able to figure it out. I can't even remember what it's called now, but when I was thinking, because I had, I've knitted basic scarves before, so I was like, okay, crocheting scarf should be easy. And I understood all the directions and all the instructions, and then I started doing it and I could not understand what it was. I kept messing up and I couldn't figure out where I was messing up. And eventually I just decided that I'm not doing anything like simple in crocheting anymore. I'm only doing in the round because I just could not figure out how to keep it like straight and the edges nice. Which I think is a very weird issue to have.
Well, I mean, different things stumble different people.
Yeah.
What seems easy for some can be complicated to others. And I'm sure, like, if I tried to make an embroidery hook, I would be hopeless, but I can do complicated lace, So be kind to yourself, you're still learning.
Yes.
Do you think you're gonna be teaching at some point? Do you like that feeling of being an instructor, a teacher?
I do, yeah. And I've have a couple of people at work who have come over and asked to do simple things in blacksmithing. And it's a very good way, I think teaching is a very good way of seeing how far you've come. I only started blacksmithing a year ago, and I was trying to teach somebody something that I learned on my first day, which is making hooks, wall hooks. And I'm thinking to myself, like, as I'm trying to explain this, like, how complicated it seems to
Explain.
It seemed when back then, and now how complicated it seems to this person who I was teaching, but how second nature it is now. And really proving to myself how far I've come, because it's very hard to see that as you're doing things. I feel like in the past year I had really not thought that I'd made that much progress in blacksmithing, and I think the same thing when I look back at my earlier crochet and embroidery projects. And then I'm going to start teaching somebody how to do a magic circle in crocheting, and I didn't know how to do that a year ago, but I figured it out, and now I'm like, what do you like? How easy it is now for me, and now I can see that progress that I've made by helping other people learn, and I think that that's a really special thing to see and to do and to pass on.
Well, I love having you on my channel for like one extra reason, besides the fact that like I'm a history geek and so I love talking to you about all things Sturbridge Village.
Yeah.
But like every time I get somebody on my channel who is just considering something, like maybe in the future, I don't know if I'm good enough, maybe at some point of my life, and then I'm getting a text message saying, guess what I just did? I'm just working on my first design. I just published my first pattern. And that's like my absolute favorite thing, you know? So like when guests of my channel say like, I don't know, maybe one day, and then it happens, to me, this is like the best thing. So I'm sure you coming back for like, where are they now? And you're going to tell us all about your designs.
I hopefully, yes.
Well, do you think you're going to be at Sturbridge Village doing just blacksmithing, or do you see yourself moving to a different building and doing something else?
I definitely see myself staying in blacksmithing, though not entirely, right? There's a lot of people that I work with who do more than one trade. One of them is four, a couple of them do four. And so once you're trained in a space, for me it was a little different. I was a fellow, so I had a year contract specifically for blacksmithing. But for, full-time employees, you can kind of just, once you're trained in a space, there's a lot of opportunity to go and learn somewhere else, and try something new, which I think is extremely important, because there's a lot of things at the village that you wouldn't necessarily get to experience other places, like coopering, which is barrel making. People never know what that is.
Right. I didn't like, I actually stopped at that place and I was fascinated because it's like it's actually like very complicated.
It's so complicated. And two of the blacksmiths that I work with are also coopers. And when I was making a handle for, I don't do woodworking like at all.
Yet.
I hope to someday. Like I want to do everything, but I had to, when I finished my hammer, I had to make a handle for it. And I was very lucky that the day that I was doing that, one of the guys that was in the shop with me was a cooper and does do woodworking, and so he was able to kind of help me through how to use like a draw knife and all these things, and how to fit things together. And even just like learning that very basic thing of like how to make a handle that fits onto your tool, that won't just like have the head flying off, is a type of woodworking that isn't necessarily thought about these days, and is very, it's very special to me to be able to like have these experiences, and to be able to, I've expand my knowledge, even if it's not to an expert level, at least being able to go into other spaces and do basic things, other trades and things like that.
Do you feel like you're living your absolute dream, like being in Sturbridge Village and like learning something new and being exposed to all these different trades, right? Or is
Yeah.
it getting to be routine at some point?
Some days it does definitely feel like a routine. I mean, it's a job like any other. So there are some days that it's just like, I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to go to work. That sounds like the worst thing in the world right now. And other days I'm like, oh, I can't wait to go in and I'm working on a really good project, or, my coworkers are or one of my coworkers might be having a really good, interesting talk that morning. So it really depends on the day, and kind of, you know, how things are going that week on my projects.
Well, I have another question that's like a bit personal,
Yes.
but you have to wear a costume the whole time. Is that difficult? Is that fun? Is that getting itchy?
So it depends on the season on whether or not it's itchy. In the winter, yes, because you're wearing wool, or wool or flannel. So if you have a wool shirt, absolutely, those shirts are very itchy. I was very happy that I got a flannel shirt. But I have a wool jacket, and like corduroy pants. But the most annoying thing about the costume, and this is for anybody who, or for those of us who wear pants, there are roughly 32 buttons in the costume that you have to do. So you have your jacket, your vest, and then there are a number of buttons on the pants. There's two or three buttons to close the pants. And then there's a flap of fabric that comes up and buttons across the top with about 6 buttons. And for men, that's not too much of a problem, because if they have to go to the bathroom, they can just undo the 6 buttons and lower the flap. For the rest of us, not so much. I remember going in for my first fitting for my costume, and the costume director, when I told her that I was going to wear pants, she was like, "There's no emergencies. The second you think you have to go to the bathroom, you have to go, because it takes so long to get out of the costume." Because like I have to take my jacket off, I have to take my vest off, I have to take my braces or the suspenders off. I have to undo all of the pant buttons just to simply go to the bathroom. And it's, you get quick at it after a while, but it's in the beginning, you're taking like half an hour to go to the bathroom, and you feel so bad for your coworkers who's stuck without you for that time.
Tell me about your like very first day at work there. Like, what was that like?
Very nerve-wracking. You learn in front of the public. So from that first day, I had one day where I was at museum education, but the museum education building where we have a more modern forge, where they were making sure that I knew how to like hold a hammer correctly. And then after that, all of my learning of how to do any type of blacksmithing was done in front of the public. All of my mistakes, everything was in front of people. And so there were times where like, I know my mentor who would be like, "Okay, things are not going well." And he'd just tell me, he'd go take a walk, go down to the basement, because it's not only are you learning something new that can be, kind of dangerous. We're working with very hot things and metal, and it's very nerve-wracking. But to do all of that in front of people just like staring at you and taking videos and photos is can really get to you. Like I remember one day in the very beginning, I had burnt my piece of metal that I was working on, and we had a huge group of school kids, and my project was ruined. I couldn't do anything to fix it, and I just kind of like had to set it down, and I looked across at the person who I was working with, and I said, "I'm gonna go fill up my water cup. I'm gonna go get some water or whatever," because I was so embarrassed. I'm supposed to be the expert, and I can talk about blacksmithing, and I knew everything that I needed to be able to talk about, but to actually be doing it and to mess up as like the expert in front of all of these people was like extremely embarrassing. It was like, I can't believe I just did that. Like, and they might not have known that I had done that, but for me that was very obvious, and it was very difficult to try and come to terms with how to deal with your mess ups in front of people as you're learning and as you're progressing and doing more complicated things.
Is that annoying when people take a video of you, like, or just walk into the building and start taking videos like I did, or like taking pictures?
No, I generally don't mind. Most people, we know that people are there taking videos and photographs. We know that people do that all the time. We actually, when I was being trained before I started, they made sure to say, like, you can say no, but people are gonna take photos of you and videos, and that's just something that you're gonna have to deal with. And so I knew going in that was going to happen. And so it doesn't bother me. I think if you asked anybody in the village, they'd say that it doesn't bother them either. That's kind of just part of the job description for us at this point. But getting used to that was kind of also weird because I've had people, like, as I'm going to lunch or coming back, like stop and ask to take photos of me while I'm in costume. And somebody has said, at least to some of my coworkers, like, oh, this is going to make a great like Christmas photo. So like, I know, like, I'm probably in somebody's family Christmas. And that's kind of strange. That feels a little weird.
What's your favorite spot in the village? Do you have like some hidden gem kind of like favorite little place?
This is not a place that visitors can go, but the pottery basement is where they do all of the production work. And it's pretty cool down there. Like temperature wise, it's cool. And there's it's a big space. A lot of the other places that we have are not as large as that. And so sometimes there's a period in between the winter season, and when we open full time 5 days a week in the spring, where we're only open until 4, but we're still there until 5. And so there will be, times where a bunch of us who are roughly the same age, early mid-20s to the 30s, we'd all go down into the pottery basement and we'd all try making pots and like doing that. And it was a great time. That was a great time, like that hour when visitors would leave and we would have to stay, of talking to people and also like doing that exploring. So I really like hanging out in the pottery basement. It's not a place that visitors go. It's a modern basement. But I would say I also really like the Richardson House parsonage. That's the minister's house that we portray. And mostly because there was one day it was -40 degrees and we all had to be at work still, and half of the buildings were closed because we couldn't heat the buildings. We physically, like the heaters couldn't keep up with the cold. And so all of these buildings are closing as the day goes by, but Richardson didn't. And so by the end of the day, I think there were like 15 of us in the Richardson parlor in the minister's house dancing. We were dancing and we were having a very good time. And you're not the minister in the 1830s, as we portray. They wouldn't have been dancing. That's very frowned upon in the time period. So it was a lot of fun, just to kind of. We didn't have a lot of visitors that day either. So, we're all in costume, and the few visitors that did come out in that weather, got to see us all kind of just hanging out, dancing in the parlor of the house. And it was a very good memory, a very good spot to be.
Do you ever forget what century you're in?
No. We do third person interpretation, which means that I am a modern person talking to you as a modern person, just in 1830s clothing. Sometimes when I have kids come in, I do pretend that I'm from the 1830s because kids love that. They get so excited. And sometimes when kids come in and they try and like, they'll be like, well, are you, do you know what a phone is? And you can be like, no, what's a phone? Can you explain that to me? And then they have no idea how to explain what a phone is because they've never got one. And so that's fun. But I've always, it's not as immersive as I think some people think it is.
Right.
It is quite interesting because people do feel as though they can ask you very personal questions. Sometimes because they think that you're an actor, and sometimes because you're on display for the public. I've had people that come in and ask me, are you married? Where do you live? And if I say, I don't live here, they're like, well, where do you live then? Like, what's like, where do you live? And I'm like, you don't need that information. Sometimes I'll say, oh, the house across the street, depending on, who's asking. Like if it's like young kids, I'm like, okay, they want to know if I live here. like this is like a village, right? So I'll say, oh, sometimes I'll tell them like I go home at the end of the day and I can watch TV and I have air conditioning. And sometimes depending on how young they are or the conversation that we've been having, I'll say, oh, I live across the street. That's my house. But when adults will ask me like, what's your family like? I'm just like, what? I don't know how to answer that question, and I don't know. That's not for you to really know.
Well, the only question I had when I was walking through the village, so there were like a bunch of little lambs and there were baby cows, I think. There were like that was like the season, right?
Yeah.
Who takes care of the animals at night? Or like on the weekends, or like when they lambing?
So our farmers do work 7 days a week. Not all of them, obviously, but we do have farmers in every day of the week. So they're in earlier than most of us are, and some of them leave later than most of us are. So that the animals can get fed and the horses too. Like it's very we do take care of the animals. Like we have them come in and everything. The animals for the most part, when they're giving birth, they can do it themselves. They're good. But we do have a vets that we can call in case of emergency. And we have had to do that in the past. Not this season that I know of. But we do have like modern vets that come in and take care of the animals when necessary. And so they're all good and healthy.
Well, you know what I noticed, that when you talk about the village, you always say we. Like, do you feel like it's your village? Do you feel like you are like one of the villagers?
In a way, yes. In interpretation, which is the department that I work in, so those of us who are in front of the public who are doing trades and household duties, it very much does seem that way when we're there. Because though it is not an actual village, we do work on a lot of like bartering, like not in actuality, but when the farmers come down and are like, oh, like I need this and this and this, and then we go and give the farmers what they need. And then maybe a couple of weeks ago, I was up visiting Freeman Farm, just to have a conversation with a coworker, and she was like, oh, this cheese is gonna go bad, do you want some? And so I just like took this wheel of cheese, part of a wheel of cheese that they had made, and it is very much a community that we've created. That's something that I talk a lot about with the people that I work with, that it is very much like a village in the way that we interact with each other and how we help each other. It's like kind of like neighbors, I guess. So I guess the answer to your question is yes. I do consider.
I mean, it definitely felt that way. It felt like I was walking through a real village, because like there was this sense of pride, of ownership, of sharing the knowledge and showing the craft and being proud of what you create.
Absolutely. I think most of us feel very very proud and excited to share our knowledge, especially because I feel like to me at least, the early 1800s is very misconstrued within like TV and movies. People view it as kind of like an extended medieval period. And like we have factories and we have there's a lot of changes that are going on within the world in the 1830s, in regards to the industrialization and things like that. And so to be able to be one of those people that is bringing that education out for people and continuing the chain of craftsmen and tradesmen, as I had said before, is something that I am very proud of and something that I strive to continue to do, whether I am staying at Sturbridge or not. I hope to continue that in my life.
Well, I'm so glad I ran into you and that you were there doing what you were doing, and we started that conversation. And I'm glad that you agreed to be a guest of my channel today, and I can't wait to see where else life will take you and what you're going to create, because I'm sure there's going to be something great.
Yes, and thank you so much for having me. I'm very glad that you were there as well, and gave me your business card. That was very exciting for me that day.
Well, thank you so much, Joselle. It was like lovely to meet you and lovely to talk to you.
You as well.
I'm cooking breakfast, which might be near and dear to you, because I love breakfast. The structure over here.
Saying you can buy spices and stuff.
Spinning and weaving are on the decline as skills in households in the time period of the village because there's so many factories and textile mills. But it doesn't mean that it's totally disappeared as a skill. We're showing it in this household as a way in which this family might be earning some extra income to sell to their neighbors custom orders of yarns or fabrics. So we're in the process of getting
favorite. It's a set of Scottish tunes, so it's actually a couple of historical songs put together. It's kind of long. This instrument uses all of your hand-eye coordination, of course, but it's What Can We Do with the Drunken Sailor? And then there is Sweet Afton, Annie Laurie, and another one called My Heart and Lute. So.
Everything that does not burn really well on its own, so it's not going to like just keep burning.